We don't do this. Eric Hunley has the whole monopoly. I don't know who that son of a bitch thinks he is, that he's got this whole monopoly on getting panels of lawyers together. But we should be doing that on our streams, like way more. I
did this way before him. I had the big brain panel before Eric Hunley even existed.
Right. That's right. Eric Hunley is back, folks. And I've got the panel going. How's everybody doing?
Good.
Great.
Hello. We gotta do it this way. Wait, no, this way.
Yeah, well, we got to figure out how this is going. How does this live streaming thing work anyway? Thankfully, I had Nate in here for the past couple of weeks, and in his capable hands, the channel did not burn down. I don't even think I was demonetized. It's shocking.
We tried.
So I'm.
Oh yeah.
Oh boy. Anybody know what happened to Eric? I have no idea what happened to me. I'm still trying to figure that out. But let's go ahead and just open with the hottest case going right now. I believe his name is Rex Hewerman. I don't know if that's the correct way to say his name, but he's like the Long Island or it looks like Gigolo Bay, but it's like Gigolo Bay or something serial killer. Anybody have any thoughts on this guy?
Well, I can give just a little background of the case from what I know. Now, this case has been going on for decades. When I was in law enforcement in New York, from being a cop to a prosecutor, this case was out there. Now, it started where they had went to a beach and found like one body. Then the next thing you know, they're finding like a whole bunch of bodies out there. So someone, and the women who they were finding were prostitutes. They were offer their services online and, meet up with somebody, and that person would, kill them. One of the weird part about the story is that the women, when they went missing, people would call their cell phones, and the killer would answer those calls and even call the family and taunt the family, like, yeah, blah, 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 this. So it got real crazy, but no one knew who this person was. So the case went cold for a long time. And now, based on DNA evidence, they've narrowed it down. Now, it's one of the more interesting facts about this case, which I think a lot of people don't realize, is that they actually didn't find his DNA because the DNA was so degraded based on the thing. They actually found a hair of his wife on one of the victims. And they were able to take that DNA sample, which was good, figure out that, hey, this is this woman, and then they were able to track it back to him, and then that's when they were able to track back burner phones and all this other stuff that he was using to do this. Now, some criminal psychologists have theorized that the taunting of the victim's family, which is sick, by the way, which is sick, was part of his fantasy, was part of the thing that would, it wasn't only the killing that would excite him, but the taunting of the families. You'll never find this person again. Yes, you're speaking to the man, the last person to see them. So
also now keeping the phone would be a trophy.
Yes,
and that's standard anymore.
But I think he started getting rid of the phones because he started getting rid of the phones now. But the last update was now that so obviously they're charging him with all these murders, but now they're also looking at, because he was traveling around. He was an architect and he was doing some traveling. They have other corpses that they've been finding at these other places that he was traveling around that they're trying to attribute to him now. I know Southern Law has some more details on it, but that's the nitty gritty of the story.
I have one question on. I read that and have heard that sometimes DAs or cops, they have some open cases out there. They're bad ones. And if you happen to have a convenient serial killer nearby or somebody who's accused of it, maybe you can clear out some of your back catalog. Steve Gosney, have you heard of this kind of thing?
Have I heard of it? Why, yes, I have. Yes, we actually had a serial killer in Daytona Beach going way back, a fellow named Gerald Stano. And it's funny. I drive past his house every day coming to work, and I always remember, like, there's the apartment building he lived in, and he lived with his wife, and he was accused of killing, well, he's known to have killed at least 22 women, and he was killed upwards, and he confessed to 41 additional, and he's suspected of up to 88 88 convictions. If you look, you can look him up on Murdertopia, which is a really good resource for serial killers. His name's Gerald Stano, Stano, and he actually killed somebody. He picked somebody up right on the street. I can see where he picked her up, right across from my office, and went out and just shot her. And so I actually know the family of that victim. Anyways, he was obviously a prolific serial killer in this area, having killed 22 people at least and upwards. But then what happened is we had a police chief at the time who ended up sitting him down with a pile of cold cases and feeding him case after case after case of unsolved murders, to which he confessed. Now, there was a lot of back and forth on that. There was a lot of what I can say controversy about this police chief. I think his name was Crow, our police chief that did that, and about whether or not these confessions were real or whether they were just a police chief cleaning up his files. So that's kind of a big unresolved question in the Stano case. And that is absolutely a thing, and now you can say, well, I'm a hero because I solved all these cases, right? But once you confess to 40, 41 or 22, what's another 41, right? I mean, it's kind of like, especially if you have an agreement, and especially when you have a police officer who is feeding the details. And there's something, and I've actually taught a bit on this in some of my classes I teach with American law courses about the value of something called a holdback list. There is an interrogation technique. There are checks against this kind of false confession. Because what happens is, assume this guy didn't kill them. You have a murderer who gets away with it. You have an unsolved murder, and you're letting that murderer get away with murder, right? And so there's a key to that, is having a holdback list, and there's a number of checks on false confessions that need to be honored by police. And in all cases, they need to be videotaped confessions, for example, number one, holdback lists that are predetermined with detail. So yes, this is a common thing, and we need to be very aware of that, and police need to be fastidious in their procedures.
I know Henry Lee Lucas, I believe, was very famous as the possibly greatest serial killer of all time, or the biggest number. And that's the other part of it too, is don't you have some of these serial killers who get off on the fact, and they'll claim everything because it's a diabolical competition with them.
Yeah, well, in fact, it's a competition with these school shooters even. That they want to kill, they want to have the maximum body count. It's a competition among some of them, and it's a bizarre thing. But if you're already down, why not be the most prolific serial killer in the world? If that's your stab at infamy. It's sad but true. Hey, there he is. Hey, Joe.
Joe, what?
Can I make a quick point about the holdback list too? It's incredibly important, because previously, when people confess to crimes they didn't do, a lot of the information comes from the person who's doing the interrogation. So, for instance, like you'll say, like a great example of this is my cousin Vinny. During that interrogation,
I didn't do it. I killed him.
Where he was like, you killed the clerk. He was like, I killed the clerk. You killed the clerk. You had the gun. You were in the green car. And they feed you all of those details, and you're just saying yes. And it's not yes because you actually did it, just because you want to get the hell out of it. And it's very subtle, but it gains a lot of false confessions. So that's what Steve was referring to when he was talking about holdback list. You don't want to give them all the details. You want them to give you the details.
And also the any conversations like that need to be videotaped. Absolutely videotaped. Because like what Nate just said about that case, context, how it's said, what is said. And a lot of times police officers don't even know that they're revealing details of the crime to the suspect. They say, no, absolutely I didn't. He volunteered it first. And then you go back and review the video, and no, they actually did. So false confessions are a major problem in false convictions. I mean, that's like presented, I think, get up to 20 to 30% of all false convictions have a false confession, because people say, well, nobody would confess to something they didn't do. I did a really good interview on my Rumble channel with a false confession expert. His name is Dr. DeClue. and he is the expert in Florida, at least, probably nationally, on false confessions. And we go through this step by step and how to prevent it. It's a really good interview. Dr. DeClue on my Rumble channel.
There's
also a badass name.
I was going to say there's a Danish case that the Broken Baker was covering where the only thing that connected the defendant to the crime was his confession, and it came from an informant working in the prison but working for police. And one of the things that they said is that, well, he knew details of the case that no one would have known unless he actually perpetrated it. Well, then it came out that in fact he was showing pictures of the injuries to the woman, like in real time. This was like 6 years ago. And so they ended up excluding that. And I think they ended up, or they're taking it under advisement, but it's very close to being dismissed because it came out that the police had in fact informed this guy of the injuries to this woman. And that's how he would have known about it.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that the same problem that happens with witness identification? Please jump in on that. Where they inject that.
Witness identification, because I've had all these problems that you're talking about. I've actually had in real time. I've had a criminal suspect confess to a crime that they didn't commit, and then you ask them, like, why would you confess to this? You didn't do this, and they're like, because they wanted to go home. They wanted to essentially please the interrogator. Okay, but I get to go home now. Like, but you're saying you committed a burglary. No, you're not gonna go home. One of the key points I think is people don't really understand. A lot of people will say, I will never confess to something I didn't do. But when you're in that spot and someone's saying, and you want to go home, you're scared, and it's just the police there, and they're saying, hey, just tell me what I want to know, and we're going to make everything all right. We're going to let you go home. There are many, many people who will do that, who will confess and will give it up, and it's shockingly easy to do. What was your other question, Eric? Because I wanted to address that too.
Well, that was essentially a witness. Cops kind of inferring, like number 3, handing a witness card or whatever, inadvertently suggesting the person that they're looking for. And if the witness is confused, they might, settle on that.
Well,
if they see the person, then they can't get that vision out of their mind. I think there's a case on that right now. Somebody help me out. Where
there's a dirty trick that it's played sometimes. Now, even though this is, you're not supposed to play with the DAs. But the cops do this sometimes, and it's a dirty trick, but it's okay. Allegedly it's okay. So what they will do is that, let's say I know you're the bad guy. I believe you're the bad guy, and so what I'll do is I'll have the lineup, and you'll have somebody, and you'll have the witness come in, but the witness, you'll say, hey, it's number 3. So the witness are going number 3, number 3, number 3, number 3, number 3. They'll walk out. And then the suspect will say, now I'm ready to have a conversation with you I'm ready to have a conversation with the cops, to have the heart-to-heart to tell you what really happened. But the witness, but the cops, but they would never use that evidence in court. They're just doing that to try to get that person to spill their guts. So they do play tricks like that. Now, I've personally never done that, but that has been done before. And what they'll tell you is that we won't use that witness in court. We're not trying to use that witness. That was just a show to get that person. And they do things like that. Like for instance, they used to tell us if the person's a Yankee fan, we'll come in there with all Yankee gear on. Hey, you got this bat signed by Jerry Jeter. Oh, it's a mind game. It's a mind game because that's essentially, you want to get the person to confess because it's the easiest way to get the conviction. But a lot of times it's just not accurate.
Yeah, one of the most difficult cases of my career, by far the most difficult case of my career, was a false confession case it's very difficult to get the average Joe juror to understand that people will falsely confess. And I'm going to highly recommend, if people are interested in the topic, you should go watch Dr. Greg DeClue and my discussion with him. We go all through it front and back about why people do it, how they do it, how much of a problem it is, ways to prevent it. In fact, police officers who are good police officers who don't want, a good police officer, you don't want to solve a crime with the wrong guy. First of all, you're convicting an innocent person. Second is you're letting somebody get away with it. So police officers, same thing with there are checks and balances also on the identification, the thing about like this guy right here, right? Again, there needs to be checks because there's a lot of confirmation bias that goes on with the police, and they think they've got the crime solved, And when they've got a serial killer sitting there, how great is it to have all your crimes, all your backlog done away with? No more work.
And nice budget.
Vice's raid.
Okay, except for him. I forgot the link.
Where is he? Why isn't he here with us yet?
It's coming. It's coming. Sorry, I thought I did send it. See, it's been a minute, folks.
I think you did send the link. Jeff kind of has a thing about he'll say, "You didn't send me the link," but he absolutely got it. So, just saying.
Oh, don't
He's a
roll
squirrel
over on
up.
your guy. Don't roll over in your guy. It's me. It's always me. Steve Gosney. No, I might not have. Here we go. Yep. Okay, I did. He's got it now. Awesome. Steve, Southern Law, as usual. You know, I can't shut you up, but what were you going to tell us about what you know with the Huerman case, or if you've studied?
Well, just looking at it over the last few days, of course, it's developing by the hour, right? But to put it into perspective, on that beach area, there were 10 sets of remains found. He's been charged with murder of three of those people, right?
Look at this guy. He makes me pay $20 to join the stream.
It's at 20,000 something. It sounds,
I need to.
You got off cheap. He charged me 50.
Hey,
Look at this guy.
hey, you know, I'm learning from Nick and you.
So this guy's been charged with 3 counts of murder. There's another one that was found on Gilgo Beach that he's going to be charged with, they say. And if you read the bail application, you find out the evidence they have against him. Because in New York, for the attempt by the DA to keep him in pre-trial detention, they can't reference public safety. I think they said that's the only state where they can't do that. So they have to play a game where they're talking about his likelihood to show up for trial, when really they want him kept there because he's a serial killer. And so anyway, so if you read it, there's a good circumstantial case against the guy. But what was interesting to me is the DNA, not all DNA evidence is the same as other DNA evidence. And the percentages they were using of exclusion were not as great as you would normally see. I would take it because it was degraded samples and things. But still unlikely it would have been somebody other than he and his wife. And I think it's pretty clear they got the right guy on this. But as Steve said, it's a matter of how many people is he involved in. Someone said in your chat, why did he stop the killing? Who said those are the first 4 people he murdered? And who says those are the last 4 people?
BTK, folks. Dennis Rader stopped killing for like a decade or more. There was no, you know, he had a span, then he killed, and then he had another span. And then it was like, I don't even think he was killing when he got caught. It was just sort of like, hey, everybody forgot about me. Let me write some taunting letters. And it got back to him.
Golden State
That's
Killer
what the
as well.
Unabomber did as well. Yeah. The Unabomber did that as well. It's like, nobody's talking about me, so I need to release my manifesto. And then his brother went, hey, I recognize that.
Well, this guy was still engaging in a lot of the stuff he did at the time he was doing the murders, which is using fake accounts and meeting up with women and sex workers and stuff. So I don't know that he didn't kill more people. It's just too early to say. Like Steve said, I wouldn't put a list of people in front of him and say, check off the ones you killed. Although that kind of has happened, that needs to be by evidence. But I'd be kind of surprised if these 4 are the only 4.
Look at him trying to be like me.
Well, once the bodies were all discovered in that one place, I mean, you know, that spot was burned, of course. So considering that they were found, I think, I don't remember exactly what the evidence stated, but that they were, you know, that the murders must have been, you know, committed in that time span, you know, when those women went missing, the early 2000s. You know, considering how much time has elapsed since then, one would presume if he was still killing, you would have found another spot. So
somebody
that's not unlikely.
I saw said something. I don't know. I saw this in passing that one of the lawyers for the victims' families is claiming that there was a female involved too. Has anyone heard of that?
I think he just said that's because the toddler that was found who hasn't been linked to this guy was wrapped up in a blanket, and that was a motherly thing to do. So when I read that and then read why he said it, I was like, nah, I don't buy that one. That's my opinion.
Yeah, and a toddler is really unusual for that. I mean, they tend to have. I mean, I'm not saying they're nice guys, but
I mean, somebody killed that baby and I think killed his mother for sure. And whether it was this guy or not, I don't know that the fact the baby was wrapped in a blanket or whatever means a woman had to do it. I mean, has this guy moved into this century yet?
But well, that's another problem. Of his
Prove it wasn't Steve Gosney. That's my only thing.
Oh,
hey,
where was he?
Lots of lawyers here that will tell me to remain silent.
There were a couple of his murders that didn't fit with the pattern, and one was a male that could have been a transvestite. You know,
if he did it, yeah.
And then the other was
Yeah.
the toddler. It just didn't fit with the pattern of his killing. So there was, some question up in the air. Also, wasn't there something else about the manner of death or something that didn't fit with the previous forensic evidence? Or was I mistaken on that?
I don't. There could be copycats too, right? I mean, that's not uncommon. There's a domestic dispute. Somebody offs their wife and kid, and they say, "Oh, there happens to be a serial killer." Make it look like that. I don't know for sure, but I'm just saying that has happened. I believe.
Yeah.
Well,
For example, Law and Lumber could be. Oh, I was just running the lathe at the time these murders happened. I had no idea what you're talking
True.
about.
Yeah.
It could be very well possible.
Good to see you here, Rob.
Hi, Rob.
Happy to see
Rob.
everybody.
One of the funny things. You remember what was the one in Utah with the YouTuber? She was killed by her boyfriend, and they were looking for her around because they were traveling around the U.S. and kind of found like 9 more bodies. And they were like, we're finding bodies everywhere. And they were looking for this one girl. Yeah.
The Utah desert is like a gather. That's like a killing field for bodies. It's like meth central. You go out in the salt flats out in the middle of the Utah desert, and I was like, there was a mysterious explosion in a single occupancy trailer out in the middle of the desert. It's like, ooh, I wonder what happened there.
Some Breaking Bad stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or the
pretty
reservoir.
much.
There's a reservoir, and there's I forgot the name of it.
Lake Powell.
Lake Powell.
No,
which
Lake
is,
Mead. Lake
Lake Mead. That's it. And there's a
Lake
huge
Powell
drought,
feeds
and
Lake Mead. Yeah.
they're leading literally. They're finding barrels as the drought's going on. It's like, 2 weeks later, another barrel. They're solving all these mafia.
Because like in the 1950s, the mafia, they put people in these 50-gallon drums, and I thought, who will ever see they'll never see the light of, wait a minute, the lake is receded, there's barrels visible, we're in trouble.
Yeah, they were finding like bodies every week. They were like, "Here's another
Right.
Las Vegas body."
Yeah, a completely crazy situation. What's weird though is a lot of these are, as you were saying, Jeff, on the early, like 70s, 60s, 50s. So the perpetrator's probably already dead too. So a lot of them are like beyond cold cases. They're just hits that are turning up.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing is like Mead itself is about at most 90 minutes away from Las Vegas. You just drive people out there, you stick them in a barrel, you throw them over the dam. That's it. The end.
Yeah, they might
Nobody
even
ever
have a
expects them to
boat.
come back.
They might even have their own little boat, party boat that's already out there. Just, hey, let's take it out there to the middle. Plop.
Nobody ever expects to find them, but they do.
A Soprano style.
It's like
No,
Pet
Heather Jr.?
Cemetery. They always come back.
All right, Joe, you're from New York. What are your thoughts on the Long Island guy?
The Long Island Madam, the Long Island Medium.
I don't know anything about this case.
All right.
Thank you. All right.
I've been very,
Wait, Joe.
I've been very
Joe,
quiet.
you know how to
I've been
pronounce
very
the
quiet. What?
You just
Someone tell
made
me how to
Eric's
pronounce
You
job.
don't. Okay, let me explain something. Okay, let's explain.
You just
one
made
thing.
Eric's job very difficult. Thank you.
I-
Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine.
There was, there was no syllabus. No one can. No one. I pay my $50 dues to get in here, but I didn't get.
Oh, you're
I'm
saying that
surprised,
because
Joe.
Mario sends you the syllabus when you go on the spaces.
Well, lucky me.
That's
I
why he's
only
saying
had to
that.
pay 20 to get the link.
Oh, my
I,
goodness.
I do know a little bit about this case. I actually listened to a podcast about it a while back, and I have
Right.
a friend who
Right.
grew up on Long Island who shared it with me. I was very surprised with the suspect that they arrested because the podcast that I listened to implicated corruption in the sheriff's office. There were some very weird things happening there. There was a DVD and some sex toys in a duffel bag. There were a lot of drugs involved.
Hey, it's Friday night here in Korea, Chandler. I don't know.
Yeah. But no, I was expecting they fingered this guy who was like the sheriff. I'm sorry.
You
for the
were
phrasing.
trying to think of a way to say that sentence, weren't
No, I was trying to think of a way to say it in another way, but that was the only word that I could come up with. So
No.
there was a sheriff who was implicated. There was a young guy who was very adamant. He was interviewed by this sheriff. He was, I'm not saying anything of substance. I'm sorry. We should move on. They got the guy. It's a different guy than I thought it was going to be. There was a podcast that was very good that I listened to that was fascinating. But anyway.
Well, and that's an interesting point of quote internet sleuthing, which is a controversial thing too. A lot of cops get upset about podcasts, but then a lot of podcasts have actually broken cases open that haven't been solved. So,
well, they've made a whole Netflix series out of like the Don't F with Cats.
Oh, that, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, can I make I'm going to put a little plug in for Megan Fox Investigates, because she's been following the Idaho quadruple murder suspect and has been very careful in reporting that. And because a lot of people, there's a sensational case and then everybody wants to be the one to break the news, and so they speculate, and the speculation then becomes fact, and it bounces around. And I remember I knew that she was following that case, and so I sent her some things, and she says, "Oh, I looked into that, and that's just rank speculation by this purchase reporter, so I didn't repeat it." Which that's what our reporting should do. But so much of what you see in the media is just speculation. To like, what do I have to write something on this case today? So, well, I hear this rumor somebody said, and it's not really evidence. The evidence that the cops have, we're not going to see all of it. It's all kind of behind closed doors.
Stephen and Gosney, you have triggered me. Because what you're talking about is what that horrific harpy Nancy Grace does for her bread and butter. This whole, I'm just going to create issues. I'm going to harp on people. I'm going to destroy people's lives. I'm going to make half-ass unfounded allegations. That's what people like Nancy Grace does.
Oh, if only Nicholas were here, he would have a lot to say about that.
Well, she also is a prosecutor, which makes it almost doubly bad.
Yeah.
Because she did have the legal training and the responsibility to know better, and she's still doing it, versus somebody like me who doesn't have training and just wants a click. It'll be irresponsible, but for her, I think it's even worse, in my opinion.
I agree.
You never apologize for being smart, Eric.
Okay. Rob.
Yes, sir.
What are your thoughts? You're so quiet.
Yeah.
I'm just quiet. I don't know how to pronounce the name of the beach.
I keep wanting to say gigolo.
Joe's got to be able to tell us that.
I believe it's Gilgo Beach. That's
but Joe's the expert. Come on, you got to know the name
Our
of the beach.
Beaches suck. No one goes there. Okay?
Rob is just.
We're not the West Coast. We don't have the cool beaches here.
It's either Dildo Beach or Gigolo Beach, or it's one of those.
Beach.
Help me with this, Joe. Actually,
Beach.
You know what, Joe and Nate, you can help me with this. What the hell is the deal with the shore versus a beach? Like normal people in our country would say the beach, but you weirdos up there keep saying the shore. So help me out with that. What's up with the shore?
But doesn't the shore just refer to the Jersey Shore?
Yeah,
no. There's a Long Island Shore also. The point is, we don't have beach. We have shore because our beaches suck. Okay,
the beach.
I think it's like less sand.
Joe's an old guy.
Wherever water meets,
you got Jones Beach, Joe.
Wherever, okay. Jones Beach, it's like all the way out. Jones Beach is okay. I mean, by New York standards, Jones Beach is like, wow, what a beach.
That's the beach.
That's it. Yeah.
Okay, my understanding of the shore in relation to that area is that there's actually like a road that goes through there. There's not that much sand, and you drive by. And a lot of people would just drive by, these barrels where there were all these dead bodies, on a daily basis.
What part of our beaches suck? Confused you guys. When you're saying there's no sand, that's part of the problem.
That's my understanding.
Dead bodies didn't persuade you to go somewhere else.
I'm just saying.
Joe, you're stressing me out. It makes me think of therapy. So let's talk about our celebrity here who gets answers from Elon Musk and what is going on.
6 million tweets.
Yeah,
nice.
6 million tweets. I love Jeff's representation of this so far has been that I got famous on TikTok, and I somehow tweeted out 6 million tweets.
6 million views, right?
Yeah.
Wow,
nice.
You're gonna be getting a check from Elon soon. You're like,
he's got 2 chats. Elon directly addressed her twice.
Wow.
Yeah, that happened.
He knows Chandler exists.
Apparently.
So tell us a story.
So the story goes, I had a very bad experience with a therapist who I'm no longer working with. I was frustrated. I tweeted something out about it, and then it blew up overnight, and I have no idea how or why. But apparently, I started a conversation that resonated with a lot of people. I had some very interesting comments. I got invited onto a couple of podcasts, and then Elon Musk said, "Wow," which was very exciting.
So what podcast are you going to be on?
I'm going to be on Honey Badger Radio next week.
Oh, nice.
And that's a podcast that they're in Saskatchewan, and they talk about men's rights
Karen,
issues.
Karen, isn't that Karen? I forgot her last name. I think I know who that is. Really, really famous channel from a few years back.
It's an excellent. I follow them on Twitter, and we've been sort of mutually following one another for a while. So that's very exciting. And then I'm going to be going on another podcast called Vent UK that also talks about...
all that stuff's minor. What you're doing something tonight at 8 p.m. that's really going to...
I'm coming on your channel. We're going to talk about a lot of cool stuff. I'm really looking forward to that.
Karen Strawn. I think that's Karen Strawn, right? Honey
I
Badger
believe
Radio?
so, yes. Yes.
Yeah,
I've been in communication. They're a team, so I've been in communication with different members of the team. And that'll be on Monday. I'm looking forward to that.
No, very cool, very cool. She was huge in the MRA community and featured a lot in the Red Pill back in the day, if anybody has ever seen that. Okay, so what went down with your therapist? You're kind of alluding to the story that was the story. So what happened? What was
you want to know the story?
Yeah.
Sure. So I worked with this therapist for 2.5 years. Yeah. And it took a while for me to learn that she was a feminist. And I'm not a feminist, which you all know.
Because you're smart.
Thank you. So I started working with this therapist because I had chronic pain issues. And I needed to talk to somebody about it. And so I never really got into personal politics. You know, a lot of the stuff that I was talking about was just me coping with how my life looks moving forward. You know, being very ambitious and then being suddenly, you know, inundated with this problem that kept me from reaching my goals. That made me, you know, it put me in a position of like, okay, I should probably talk to somebody and utilize therapy. So I did that. And she was a good therapist and I liked her. She took my insurance. She was available. She was, you know, nearby. So, yeah, so it was convenient. And then after a while, I started to notice that she would like kind of make little comments here and there, you know, that were sort of like negative about men. And, you know, I was very open with her about my views. And then one day she made this very interesting comment to me about the patriarchy. She told me that the patriarchy was responsible for a lot of my problems, which was hilarious because the problem that I was specifically discussing with her was, it actually had to do with me beginning streaming. I was on Vice's channel and I started experiencing some cyberbullying from former friends of mine who were all women. They were all women.
What? Women that are cyberbullying Chandler from my stream, just knock it off.
It was in February, but but anyway,
knock it off. Still, seriously, knock it off.
It's over and done with. But I brought this into therapy and I talked to her about it, and she said, "Well, when you're a woman in a public-facing role, you know, the fact that we live in a patriarchy means that you're going to get some pushback." And I was just like, but the problem is that there are women who are doing this, and there are men who are defending me and supporting me. So I don't understand what the patriarchy has to do with this. I sat there for a while and I was like,
did she answer that question?
So which question?
Well, did you throw that question at her? Like
I did. I sat there. Well, I kind of asked her. I was like, I sat there really uncomfortable for a while, and I eventually asked her, can you tell me more what you mean about the patriarchy? Like, what can you describe what that is? Can you define that for me? I'd like to understand what the patriarchy means to you and why you think we live in a patriarchy.
Well, I don't know why. I know why anyone would think that, because we live in a world where live streaming, men outstream women by an 8-to-1 ratio.
Well, that's very patriarchal, Joe.
Well, especially on this channel. Thank you, Joe, for pointing out.
It's statistically proven right here
right
and now.
Joe is a statistic.
Chandler is the token female. Thank you. No, Joe said it.
Well, I'm and on my last stream, I was the one person who didn't have a beard, so that was hilarious. I felt very.
Wait a second. In fairness, I do identify as lesbian.
That's true. That's true. You do. You are not. So Well, I wanted to share, she had a very interesting answer to the question when I asked her about the patriarchy. And Joe, I really want to know what you have to say about this in particular. So I asked her, why do you think that there's a patriarchy? What is the patriarchy? And her response was, well, we live in a patriarchy because, first of all, there are lots of men in government. And second of all, just look at what happened with Roe v. Wade recently.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
That's an indication that men are trying to control women's bodies and have control over that. And I was like, okay, but there was legal precedent for that. But like, she's not. So I had to just let it drop. But that was my first indication that this woman was a feminist. She was like, just to be clear, she told me, she was like, I have a degree in women's studies, and that degree has been hanging on my wall this entire time, and I apparently had not looked at it. And so that was the first, the first brick that fell, basically. But
and you didn't bring up RBG?
Answer,
you didn't bring up RBG when she mentioned Roe v. Wade? No, sorry.
I was kind of flabbergasted at the time. I had to collect my thoughts, and I was just like, can I work with a feminist? Can I keep going to therapy when I know my therapist is a feminist? I don't know if I can do that.
Well, aren't they supposed to just listen? Isn't part of it like, what's this lecturing?
Like, you're literally paying people hundreds of dollars an hour just to go, yeah, we sense that you feel pain.
Can I also note
listening.
Thankfully, I never paid her a dime because my insurance covered everything, but I do regret just working with her at all.
Well, can I also just note that this is a very California type problem?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that on YouTube, on Twitter, and people jumped on you.
Oh, yeah. What
do you mean it's California?
Mention what?
The therapy and the feminism.
California therapist, yeah.
Question, though, what did you think of Elon's response? Because I thought that was a thoughtful answer, but not quite what was expected. He's obviously not a fan of therapy, and kind of came in saying, hey, get a
What
friend.
What did he say?
I really liked his response. I can pull it up right now. He replied a couple of times. I didn't come prepared. I should have.
He
You
replied.
didn't realize you were going to be.
times.
You didn't realize that when you're starstruck that we were just going to sit here trying to bask in your glow and then steal it for
because she
ourselves as
said-
part of our
Very
patriarchal
nice.
duty to
Guys.
strip you of any of your dignity and rightfully earned acclaim and take it for ourselves.
Shame.
You realize that?
Shame.
How is that not clear to you?
Shame.
No, because she's saying
And by the way, it's
Shame.
9-to-1 ratio
8
now.
o'clock
It's
tonight.
9-to-1.
I have it.
Yeah.
If you want me to read it, he
Yes,
replied,
please.
and he said he replied twice. His first reply, he said, "Friends are far better than therapy. The incentive structure is to keep you hooked, never cured. Be especially wary of therapists in expensive neighborhoods. Their true loyalty is to their landlord, not you." So I thanked him for that, and in my I just said, I appreciate this insight. Thank you, Elon, for your thoughtful reply. So he said, "You're welcome. Friends need to know whether you simply want to feel."
Cloud chaser.
Wait a second. Did I skip over something? No, yes. He said, "You're welcome. Friends need to know whether you simply want to feel supported or actually to solve a problem. Men often assume the latter, which may entail painful words, so best to tell them explicitly." To which I replied, "This is an important distinction. I think women frequently misunderstand that men are trying to be helpful when they offer solutions. And overall, if women gave men a bit more leeway, there might be better communication between the sexes." So I got a little off topic of therapy there, but I think that's an important thing to know.
That's a really interesting thing that what he was saying there in a couple of ways. First and foremost, as a friend, like whenever I have someone unload a problem on me, I will frequently say to them, there's two kinds of friends, and they're both could be really good friends. One is someone who you're looking to vent to them and they're just going to be supportive, and others might give you constructive criticism, which you may not be in the mood to hear.
Right.
So when you're asking me, when you're unloading on me, just tell me, would you rather that I just support you no matter what, and I can do that, or would you rather that I should try and give you some suggestions that I have that might not sound completely supportive? And in my experience, which I've done this no fewer than 50 times, I'm 50 for 50. They always say, "Give me the constructive criticism," and they never mean it. I mean,
Joe is absolutely correct. Joe is absolutely correct. As men, we have two directives in our life: to provide and fix things. So whenever anyone, woman or man, says, "This is my problem," yada yada yada, we say, "Oh, well, here's what you need to do to fix that problem," whether or not we were asked. That's just something we do. And so, I get what Joe is saying completely. And by the way, Kurt is the only other guy who has any sense of fashion at all as far as hats are concerned. You all are degenerate. All the
That's
other
fair.
like baseball
That's fair.
cap wearing people.
Yes, that
Kurt
is
is the
fair.
only other one with any hat sense at all.
That is fair.
Can I, following up on Joe's point, I have a feeling that there's something to that, and it's in the delivery. And where I'm going is, you've heard the term, but behold the underlying truth. So everything said before the but is irrelevant. Everything after the but is what actually sticks. Because you'll say, hey, I don't want you to get angry, but, and then you just unload on people or whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes with the constructive criticism side, Joe, try this. I don't know if it'll work, but just say, blah, 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 blah. But that's so messed up what they did to you. So if you finish it on a you're so important or you're a value or hey, hell yeah, you are right, then that's going to be the last message that they hear. And it softens some of the critical aspects that could be hard to face. It's just a random thought.
Being a good listener is an art, and it's difficult. It takes a long time. I had to learn how to listen instead of giving constructive criticism, because I'm actually much more male brain in that regard. Like, I'm more of a fixer. I'm more of a like solution oriented kind of person, and a lot of people don't necessarily like that. So you just kind of have to learn to listen.
Just being a good communicator, period, because it's both the listening aspect and also the talking aspect.
Right.
People, one of the biggest fallacies that always comes up is, well, I'm sorry you took it that way. Communication is a two-way street. You actually have to be able to change the language you're using to speak. Otherwise, you're not getting your point across. So it's both. You have to recognize what the person is receiving and how what you are saying is impacting them, and change the dialogue if you need to. And you have to also be listening actively and listen through all the things that are being told to you. So it's both ways.
Yeah. And by the way, I was exaggerating when I said none of them actually mean it. Some of them do mean it, but I will say I'm 50 for 50 that they always claim to want to have constructive criticism. I just haven't found that that's always being completely truthful, because they're just not always ready for it. But at the very least, it insulates you. If you offer that up to someone, at the very least, it insulates you from them getting terribly upset with you for giving them constructive criticism, because you're like, look, you know, I offered, I was willing to be supportive, and I'm still willing to be supportive. You just, you know, you asked me to be constructive, so I'm gonna drop on you some perspective you may not embrace.
I do not want your constructive criticism. I just want your unending praise and validation.
Yeah, I know. And let me tell you something. You are one incredibly beautiful human being, Kurt. You are just fabulous. Everything about you is just amazing, and it's like you're terribly handsome. You're incredibly brilliant, and you're pretty much the smartest human being I've ever met. So.
Well, thank you.
This is pretty good.
Were you going to say something about Kurt?
This is pretty good. I could get used to this. This is fine. I like this. This is good. This works for me.
Nate, you were coming in?
No, I said his pronouns are gorgeous and handsome.
Oh my!
Wow.
So when do you guys going to say something about Kurt?
Please stop. Anytime. Stop.
Did your therapist reply to the tweet or anything on that?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I discussed this privately with my friends, and I wasn't going to necessarily air it out, but here's what happened. I tweeted that. I had a new session with a new therapist who is actually based and very cool, and was kind of shocked at the experience that I had. He was very offended by her behavior, and he said that it was a reminder to keep his own biases in check moving forward in his profession. So I have a lot of hope for this therapist.
But
I'm hearing feedback. Sorry.
Yeah, where's that from?
Steve.
It's probably MLS Law Show.
No, it's not me.
No, I was kidding. You were the only muted one out of the 10 of us. That's why.
I was being proactive.
My apologies.
We're all hearing voices.
So where was it? Sorry, that distracted me a little bit. So where was I?
Go ahead.
So I had a great session with the new therapist, and then I broke up with my now former therapist. I kind of just sent her an email saying I don't want to work with her anymore.
Yeah.
She wanted to know why.
Who's watching a video about the most popular book of the summer? Who's guilty?
What is the most popular book? She wanted to know why. And so the thing is that The Blaze wrote an article about Elon's response to me. And so I just sent her that as an explanation.
Nice.
She did not reply.
Ouch.
You know, it's funny because you would think a therapist, because isn't that something that they teach you? Because they teach you to try to hold your biases because it's for the client, and you're trying to help them. You know, instead of imposing your beliefs on them, you're trying to get them to express themselves in a more productive way. So it's you know, I don't want to say she's a bad therapist, but it just seems like
I would go there.
She's a terrible therapist.
She is, Nate, because that's the one thing I was talking to Chandler like in real time while this was happening. I'm like, what are you doing? You woke up this morning and you had 5 million people watching your tweet, and her therapist was doing F all.
It's I'll say it. I'll tell you right now. You know, one of the things that we always hear about is that we need more mental health. It's all about lack of mental health. All these shootings, lack of mental health, and that we just, you know, we need to spend more money on mental health, which is, no one wants to see shootings. I don't want to see anyone dying. Who the heck, especially kids? It's terrible. It's really terrible. And I agree that there's a big problem with mental health. I just think that our mental health professionals, too many of them, contribute to the problems with mental health rather than curing them.
Well, they do.
They're too many of them are agenda driven. Not all of them. I'm not looking to cascade the entire profession, but I think that the messaging from the top is very agenda driven. There's been a radical shift in how they approach mental health issues, and instead of recognizing that, hey, 15 years after we brought in DSM-5, our society is more miserable, more angry, and less satisfied with their own lives than ever before, perhaps in human history, despite having more wealth and access to mental health professionals. I mean, how can you not find them? You walk outside, if you get mugged, it's probably by some mental health professional as well. You know, everyone's doing mental health.
But Joe, why is that?
There's so
why
much.
Do we feel that way, Joe?
I'm simply saying that I think that some of the new directions that our mental health profession has taken has literally made society a much worse place to live. So spending more money on mental health is not the answer if it's just feeding more gasoline rather than actually helping people find the genuine tonic to their lives. So sometimes people who are seeking mental health, instead of being coddled and being enabled, they actually need constructive criticism, delivered tenderly, delivered with respect, and an understanding that, you know, this is a person who's struggling and suffering with whatever particular issues that they have, but not to say, yeah, you're right, everyone else is wrong. And that you don't need to correct anything, because that's I think what I feel is happening far too often with people who have genuine issues, that their issues just become more entrenched and far worse, rather than actually saying, hey, you know what, maybe there's other ways of looking at your problems so you can deal with this and face up to your problems and recognize that these challenges are not something that should be destroying your life, but rather are a chance for you to enrich yourself and grow beyond who you were before you came across these problems.
Exactly.
You know, there's a new
completely
TV
agree.
show with Harrison Ford that plays a therapist. And the idea of the show, I only watched the first couple of episodes this far, but he's mentoring another therapist. And this therapist goes off the deep end by telling clients and patients exactly what he thinks and exactly what they should do. And it's yielding positive results, but he has to hide it because that's the wrong thing. That's the wrong thing to do. It's a TV show about therapists, and I can't remember the name of it. But that's the wrong thing to do, apparently.
Well, I wanted to.
What Joe's saying, Joe's saying there, and I want to echo what he's saying, and that is, there is something to be said for, you know, self-worth and feeling better about yourself, but there's also something about looking at yourself in the mirror and bettering yourself gradually, day by day, and addressing, like, nobody's perfect, and we all know areas in which we can improve our lives and improve ourselves, and looked at making a self-assessment and working on our own flaws and not blaming the world for what we are. And
locus of control.
A lot of validation.
One caveat there is that we're constantly being reminded every single day that the world imposes circumstances on us. We never actually own our own existence.
We should
constant reminders that we face where the world is hard. It's going to be difficult. You know, you smash your head against a brick, and at some point in time, you can break through that brick wall. If you just
already done that.
Just why does the world have to be this thing that is forcing itself on you? Why can't you go out there, live your life, and live the best life without
exactly?
I want to go back to what Joe was saying for a second.
Hold on, let Chandler jump in here.
Oh, I mean, no, go ahead. Who else wanted to contribute?
No, I was just saying, you know, do I want? I don't mind. Yes, mental health it's become this monster, right? We don't know if it's the mental. If now it's like one of those things where you don't know you have a problem, but then you go and you find out you have a whole bunch of problems, right? Because everybody's more cognizant of it. But I do think we don't want to throw out the good for the perfect. For instance, mental health 50 years ago was that just go outside and be a man and take care of it, and then that person would go crazy and do all this stuff. Versus now, let's talk about our problems. So I do think
Preach, Nicholas the lawyer. Preach, Nate. Preach, Nate.
I do think that it's not perfect, but I do think identifying that, like for instance, and here in New York, most of the things that happen on the train, well, here in New York, I'm in Texas, but in New York, most of those things that happen on the train, like with Daniel Penny, those are people with serious mental health issues. And I think you're right. They're not being helped by the system because that system is designed to help them. But I still don't think that we shouldn't strive to be better or to try to have a better system because we've identified these are problems that people have. But I think like the experience that Chandler has, it may be indicative of that particular therapist, but I don't think it's the problem of all therapy and all therapy should be thrown out because of this one problem. Because there's decades and decades and decades of science. I have a psychology degree and of science that shows that yes, more people are helped by just identifying that you do have a problem than are not.
I think about this, with all the shootings you have there, which anyone who commits a mass murder or attempts a mass murder is obviously someone who has serious mental health issues. Right. How many of them do you think never got any mental health help at all? I would venture to say probably zero. Yeah. Zero failed to seek out some level of mental health, or at least if not seek it out.
James Holmes was working with a therapist. The Aurora shooter, the one who shot up the movie theater, he was working with a therapist at the time of the shooting, right before.
SSRIs. Look that up. There are some very scary correlations. I'm not going to say it's causal, but there are strong correlations with SSRIs and mass shooters.
Absolutely. Just like with ice cream and shark attacks, right? There's strong correlations, but that doesn't mean one causes the other.
Correct.
Well, I'm going to go a little bit more into detail. I wanted to reply to what Joe was saying before, which I thought was really insightful. The fact of the matter is, so like I talked a little bit about my experience in therapy. I didn't really talk about the reason that I left the therapist. It became clear to me over time that she was very enabling. And I'm not saying that she wasn't supportive. She was very supportive. And she helped with certain things. She was very enabling to the degree where I would bring in something and I would acknowledge I did this thing and I messed up and I need to take accountability for it. And she would say, no, but you're young and now is the time to make mistakes in your life. And I was like, no, I'm an adult and I'm taking responsibility for this. And I want to reflect on the choice that I made, and moving forward, I want to make different choices. She was very enabling. And it became clear to me that her whole style was, to affirm and to coddle, and that is not what I want. Personally.
And here's the thing, if you think about it, if you're a mental health professional and you're looking to build and expand your business, so if you're someone who's always the voice of you're right, everyone else is wrong, that encourages people to keep coming back to you, even if they're not getting mental health, because because when they're in your zone, they feel good, and they almost never feel good. They have their mental health issues. They almost never feel good, but they know when they come to you, they feel good, but they're not feeling good for the right reasons. They're feeling good because you're just sitting there as that friend that they don't have, who's just saying, you're perfect, you're beautiful, you're the most masculine human being, Kurt, I've ever seen before.
Which is exactly what Elon Musk was saying, though. He was saying, watch out for these therapists who are like, they are going to try and create that circumstance for you so you keep coming back. And, this... Sorry.
No, I'm sorry for interrupting you. I was just going to say that, that there is, like, all these things are in balance. Like, I don't think that necessarily what your psychiatrist was doing is fundamentally wrong, because that can be at least what they're trying to aim for, maybe. Because the idea that people don't love themselves enough and people don't have enough self-love, like, I think is something, because I tend to be hard on myself, and people will be sometimes in chat will even say things like, we wish you loved yourself the way we love you because you're too hard on yourself. So there's some role to be had for people not having enough confidence or not enough security in themselves. So
sure, but you have to get to know your patient and specifically what that patient needs. And I mean that what I needed in particular was not to be coddled. Like I came in, she tried to create this circumstance where she identified me as a victim of something that was complete bullshit. Like she tried to frame things like, you are a victim of something, and I did not feel that way. And I feel like that's a huge problem.
Well, but there's
to
another
create that
point
mindset for
Elon made in his response to you that I think is a very important point, and that is the value of friendship. And that's something that we've gotten so lonely in the society, and everything's gotten through this little phone, and our societal breakdown, the men versus women and men against men, women against women, breaking people up into little isolated, lonely people. And we really need to work on being, developing our friendships. But, the way we develop our friendships is by being better friends and learning how to be a friend to others and reaching out and doing something good for others that doesn't gain us anything, but being good to somebody because you can, and it makes that person happy. And, and through that, by learning to be a good friend, we will gain friends. And I think that this is something that our lonely society really needs some work on, is developed, because friends, you're paying somebody for sometimes giving you what you don't have otherwise. So perhaps the better result would be to invest in being a better friend.
I agree.
I like the song lyrics from Jason Aldean's new song.
Oh my God! That's we should talk about that next. But I do want to say this. I think therapy, unfortunately, it's become woke in a sense, and I think Chandler, as a woman, has experienced the same thing I've experienced as a Black male going to therapy. Because so when I went to therapy, it wasn't because my problems weren't because I made mistakes. It was because of society hates Black men. And struggled was holding me back. I was being held back as a Black man, and it wasn't really my fault that I didn't get the job I wanted. It wasn't my fault that I didn't do this, or it wasn't my fault. And it was kind of a way to try to help me understand that, hey, I can do more, but it's like you're being held back. And at a point, I had to say, like, no, this is ridiculous, right? The reason why I didn't do well on that test is because I didn't study for it. The reason why I didn't get that job is because I wasn't the best candidate. And when I kind of pushed back on the person was like, yeah, I understand that, but you understand that there's a whole structure here that you're kind of fighting against as a Black man. But I'm thinking it's because the therapists are coming from those same woke institutions that we all realize.
Where do they learn?
Those same colleges, those same things, and they're learning that there and coming out to the real world and trying to help people by saying, hey, this is not your fault. You are, because of who you are is the reason why these things are happening to you, not because of what you do. And that's the part where I think therapy needs to change. And I think that's what happened to Chandler. It was because of who you are, and there's really nothing you can do about that. So we'll help you try to fight against that. But now I'll also say is that when I did move from that therapist to essentially a white guy, and you know what that white guy said? He essentially told me, it's like, be a man. Like it wasn't be a man, but it was essentially that. And that woke me up. And it woke me up to the point where I went, and there was no more excuses. I went and did what I had to do. That's why I was able to become a college professor, do all this other shit. It's because nothing was holding me. I found out that the fact that I was Black and selling and using that as an excuse of why I wasn't being successful was the actual fact why I was being held back. And I think that's what we're trying to prevent, is that these therapists from holding us back because of who we are and helping us become who we want to be, not because of I'm Black. It's because I need to improve these things myself. And I think that's what Chandler's experienced, and that's what I experienced. But that may be different for you white guys, but it's not.
So wait, what? You just figured out you were Black? You just figured that out?
Nate, I think that
I could have told you that like a while ago, Nate.
I think it's universal. And again, I said it earlier, I don't know if anybody heard, but the locus of control. I really believe this in my heart and soul, because let's take the worst case scenario. Yes, the whole system's rigged against you. Okay, what can you do? The system's rigged. How can you interact with the system in a different way in order to get the system to work for you? You can't control other people. You can only control yourself.
And that's
it could be wrong, it could be evil, it could be anything else, but how you interact with the world or how you choose to react or whatever, That's the only possible thing that you can control.
Healthy
That's what I was
therapy.
just thinking.
Or you
I
can play dead.
They were
Healthy-
missing the point with Chandler and Nate's therapist as examples. They're missing the point of what they're trying to do.
Yeah, healthy therapy should be designed to help you swim in the very challenging environment that we call life, and whatever society that you're
right,
in,
Joe.
and teaching you how to navigate through that, rather than telling you the environment that you're in is wrong. And it's their fault, and that's why you're having all these problems, because it's such a defeatist attitude. You're basically telling people that they're helpless. This is part of I've said a year ago that everyone complaining about CRT and these parents going out there. It's not the damaging effects of telling people that we live in a prejudiced society or all this, and that the system is so fatally flawed that it could never be corrected unless it's ripped down, is not as damaging, and that's all white people's fault. That's not as damaging to a white kid as it is to a minority kid. It's far more damaging to the minority kid, because you're basically telling them that you're helpless, and that you're and that society is rigged against you, and that your voice, and what happens is you're teaching them that either they cannot win, or they necessarily should be valued irrespective of a lack of development of their own ability to achieve. Because, well, we need to raise you up because of the fact that you're black, or because you're gay, or because you're a woman, or whatever minority they decide to focus on. That's where your value lies in. It lies in your intersectionality, rather than any merit that you actually achieve or any effort you put in. It lies in your intersectionality, and it has to lie in that, because you can never achieve, because you can never attain merit, because the system is so deeply flawed and so deeply rigged against you. It is so terribly damaging to a kid to hear this, that you're almost making it impossible for them to succeed. And we keep delivering this message over and over again, and then we have so much misery, and of course it's causing misery to some white kid who feels like, oh my god, I don't want to be an oppressor. So it's literally causing misery to everyone involved, and the people it's designed to help are the people who it hurts more than anyone else.
You're absolutely right. I mean, this is what I was indoctrinated with in my liberal college. They called it the myth of meritocracy, which is the idea. So the myth of meritocracy was something that I was taught. It's basically, there is this myth that if you just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, that you can achieve in life. But that's not true, because if you're black or brown or gay or disabled, you can't. I mean, that's what I was taught, literally, in college. And I believed this. But the thing is that I never really bought into it, because I always just thought, well, if the system is rigged against me as a woman, then I'm just going to ignore that and continue to push forward, because I'm not going to be a victim of anything.
I was arguing with some feminists about the gender pay gap. And I
love that you were arguing with a feminist, Nate. Go on.
No, because I could, in the most truest sense, I believe men and women should vote equally, all that other stuff. But I think obviously there's differences that we got to recognize. But one thing I pointed out to, I said, well, Hillary Clinton says the whole gender pay gap thing is bullshit, right? She said, she's actually said it publicly, and they were like, no. So I literally played the clip. I'm like, here it is. Here, Hillary Clinton saying it's all made up, it's bullshit. And that person then said Hillary Clinton has what do they call
internalized misogyny?
She's given up on women or whatever.
That's what they said to me.
I'm like, Hillary freaking Clinton. Are you really serious? Because the gender pay gap is BS. It's all bullshit.
Yeah.
But the thing is that they need you to feel like you're oppressed, because if you feel like you're oppressed, that gives them more money and more votes. If the Democrats out there telling you that, hey, you know what? The people holding you down, not you, it's these evil white men Republicans. Come vote for us. And you know what? There's millions of people who believe that.
I'm sorry. Do you want reparations, Nate? I'll give you a reparation.
Well, I'll say
I want them.
Having prosecuted, I did a juvenile prosecution for about 3 years. I did a whole county. Yeah. I did every juvenile in the entire county for about 3 years. Wow. And one thing that came through loud and clear to me as a criminal prosecutor was that the worst thing that you can do for your child is to give them an excuse to fail.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what you saw. 99 out of 100 kids would come up there and they'd have their whole bag of tricks. The excuse that they were given, my daddy left me, or whatever the excuse was, that allowed them to get through their world, and said, well, the reason I broke into that car was because daddy left me. The reason I did this, right? And they had this big bag of excuses, like it's the patriarchy, or it's my color, or it's this or whatever. You never saw the parents who said, he doesn't I don't give him excuses. You're responsible for what you got to do, and you succeed or fail on your own devices. You don't see those parents in criminal court. And there's a reason for that, because the worst thing you can do for your child is give them that excuse.
I had the same experience with my daughter's school. You know, she would get in trouble for whatever, fighting with a kid or whatever. And then you brought in, you meet with the principal and the counselor and the social worker and all this stuff. And they're like, well, it makes you feel like you have to do this. And why did you do this? And how does that make you feel? And I'd sit there and let them do their little spiel. And then I'd be like, all right, well, you know, you messed up. You're not doing it again. And if you continue to do it, there's going to be further reparations at home in addition to whatever. And, you know, kind of the problem goes away. But the school was very much like, well, tell us how you feel about this. And why are you doing this?
My mom has my sainted mama. She, I remember one time when there were some problems we were having growing up, as all little boys do, right? And it was my brother, not me. And she went into the office, and the principal of the school said, well, the reason that he's having these problems is because he comes from a broken home. And my mom's eyes turned to fire, and she fought and said, I don't want to hear those excuses. What, so you're going to throw the kid away? You know, I came from a broken home. Well, does that okay, so that excuses any bad behavior that I ever want to do? No. Or you can say, look, that's the cards I'm dealt. I'm going to play them the best way I can and accept that those are the cards. I mean, some people are born with beauty, some people are born with wealth, some people are born with scintillating personalities and intelligence, or sometimes you don't have much of that at all, but you got what you got, and do the best you can with it.
Amen. Next legal topic.
Yeah.
that was a nice segue, just kind of a smooth segue into the next topic.
Fault. Sorry. Well, actually, no. It was the woman's fault.
Oh,
not a woman's fault.
My
role as a member of the patriarchy is to blame. Blame
does it always boil down to the woman's fault?
Me, Joe.
So here's a question for Jeff. What happened with your business? She going to trial?
Yeah.
Sorry, didn't mean to catch off guard, but
I'm chewing some ice here.
Sorry about that.
What happened is just a couple of minutes ago they had they had the final competency hearing. They've had 5 competency hearings. The initial 3, the state found that Taylorship Business was competent to stand trial. Surprisingly or not, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, say no more, the defense expert who was appointed to give her opinion as to whether or not Taylorship Business was competent to stand trial came back finding no, she wasn't. And I would say that if you go watch my stream about this, she was about this close from going full on Johnny Depp, Dr. Spiegel with her testimony. I mean, like, no matter where I would pause it, she was always in some form of weird facial contortion, giving her these weird opinions. But at the same time, the court ordered he didn't order the defendant. He said if the defendant wants to do this, if they want to appoint their expert to do an examination of her to determine whether or not she is competent to stand trial, that's great. But at the same time, he appointed a court-appointed psychologist who had done, I believe, the 3rd evaluation. So he had already done an evaluation of her. And literally just before I came on your stream, we streamed the competency hearing. And this judge is a top-notch judge. He's a great judge. I love this judge from day one. He is stuck by this July 24th. We are going to trial line from February of this year. So much to the point where the last week, exactly a week ago, the defense gave their experts testimony as to whether or not Taylorship Business was competent to stand trial. And this morning at I guess it was 8:30, 9 a.m. Central Time, they had this hearing, and the judge was so confident that his court-appointed attorney was going to come, his court-appointed examiner was going to come back with she was competent to stand trial, that he scheduled the competency hearing in the morning and jury selection in the afternoon. So
Respect.
So
Respect.
jury selection is scheduled to start just right. I mean, like the final jury instructions and whatnot. It's ready to go. They're gonna do this right now as we speak.
So when is this supposed to start? Monday?
Monday, Taylor's Business will start. But also, like Taylor's Business and Sarah Boone, the suitcase murderer, was scheduled to start on the same day on Monday, but they just continued Sarah Boone, the suitcase murderess, to October, and hopefully Kurt and I will be doing that together in October when it comes around, the Sarah Boone trial.
David and I are going to be doing that, so you're going to have to compete with us. Sorry.
Well, the judge said, from what I heard, that he only put it in October just to keep it on the system. He asked the defense guy, "We're not going to be trying it then because you won't be ready." And he said, "Yeah, because they've got to get this Dr. Bozo up there to talk about battered spouse."
Chandler, you're always welcome to join me on my channel if you would like to stream with me about this Sarah Boone trial or whatever, or whomever.
I'd love to come on your channel. That would be great.
On Sarah Boone, I will say that I suspect that the defense, they're having a lot of trouble getting a expert to say what they want them to say, because even though people think that experts who wave $1 and they'll say what you want, that is generally not my experience, at least in Florida, in my jurisdiction, that there will come back. There may be somebody that leans pro-defense, but I think they're going to have trouble finding anybody to opine, some expert to opine that she did what she did because of some pre-existing battered spouse thing. So
apparently they have somebody though, Steve.
Yeah,
they have somebody.
Have you heard the theory on it? It's a misunderstanding of what battered spouse syndrome the defense is. The theory that they keep putting forward is a misunderstanding of what the legal defense actually justifies.
This is there's another angle to this that I'll share, and is that I don't think that there is a defense. And so what the reason she's going through defense lawyers is because they say, you don't have a defense. Tell me what the defense is. And she comes up with nothing. She doesn't say you need to plea. She doesn't like that. And so she fires the lawyer. She gets into it. And so they're going through lawyer after lawyer after lawyer. There's no defense here. So it's just going to be up to at what point does the judge lose patience and say, you're going to trial. You've had enough time. You've had enough time to fish for the defense expert that you want, and you haven't found him. We're going to trial. And they're just going to have to take the big L because she doesn't have a good defense.
Well, he did
right
tell
now what they've said right now is that they do have someone, they have prepared an opinion, but they have not paid the expert to issue their opinion.
But that's typical. You usually do not get the expert to write the opinion, because once the expert writes it, you have to disclose it to the state, and then the state calls them and you're down. So what you do is you retain them as an expert to advise you, and if you don't like what they're saying, they do not convert it down to written opinion. So that's very typical when they're saying something you don't want to say.
Well, whoever this person he said this person will not participate at the state rate. So the whole hearing on September 18th is apparently to ask for some level of funding where this person would feel comfortable participating in this case. But the person has indicated they would participate in the case. Now, Steve, like you're saying, I don't know if that person has examined it and said, I think she was in imminent fear or not. Like, I don't know the person's opinion, but he does say he has one who will work on the case. They just want more money. And
that was the issue. That imminence threshold when you see that video. I watched that video again a couple weeks ago. My word.
It's not a good defense, but she's entitled to an expert. And on July 11th, they had an expert that had done an evaluation, had formed an opinion, and just needed to be paid, like Steve had said. So the only issue is paying this person and at what rate they're going to pay them. And the hope was that it was going to get sorted out between July 11th and today so that they could proceed with trial. That's why it wasn't adjourned until today. But if their expert's not going to participate because they won't agree to the fee, then they've got to go find someone else. It might be.
But in defense of experts, you can't minimize or detract from the expert's testimony just because they're not getting paid. I mean, these people are doing work. I'm dealing with a case right now, IRL, in real life, where there's a massive loss of life, and we need one particular person's opinion on the loss and damages that the relative suffered, and she is uniquely qualified to give this opinion, and it's going to cost the the defendants in the lawsuit about $35,000 to get her answer to this, her legal opinion, her written legal opinion is going to be about $35,000. But this is someone who's uniquely qualified to address this issue, who's a professor of a law school in the middle of a summer vacation while she's supposed to be taking her own personal vacation. So her rates reflect all of these things, but you cannot fault her for that. So, I mean, whether someone's getting paid or not and how much they're getting paid does not necessarily mean that their opinion is like a hired gun or they're paid for giving the opinion. It just means they are the best person you have qualified. And this is what it's going to cost you to get that most qualified person to give you their opinion.
Here's the other thing. With all the letters that she keeps sending and the ex parte communications to the court, I can imagine that a therapist would be hesitant to give an opinion when your client or the person that you're giving the opinion on keeps undermining the opinion by her own words.
That's a good point. Another thing she did today was tell the judge, why hasn't my most recent letter been posted? And I have another copy of it for you. And when's it getting posted? So she has some letter.
I thought she was complaining about the fact that they were being posted and they're being brought to public attention.
She did, but today in the hearing, she said, "Why isn't my most recent letter posted?" So I was checking it.
What do you want, ma'am? What do you want?
Yeah, she wants it posted. She wants all of you to read it.
Meanwhile, and unrelated, as far as people writing letters and leaking information, anyone catch a New York Times article today from on the Sam Bankman-Fried and Carolyn Ellison?
No.
Oh God.
I saw that.
So the U.S. just filed a letter in the criminal case. Apparently, Mr. Bankman-Fried leaked a lot of interpersonal communications between Ms. Ellison to the New York Times, and the U.S. is pissed about it because it's undermining the credibility of their chief witness. So it's really nasty, but it'll be fun to watch.
Let me see. Steve Southern Law chat's reminding me.
Right.
Speaking of crazy, Daryl Brooks. What's up?
Oh
with him?
yes.
Yeah. So
he pled guilty.
Yeah, he did plead guilty to felon in possession a week ago. Today was supposed to be his final pretrial conference for the case people wanted to see. That's where he abused Erica Patterson, who he ran over first, right? And they let him out, and then he went on to what he did do, which was horrible. But that hearing didn't get streamed today. I was trying to stream it, and I imagine it was canceled because yesterday afternoon he filed a motion, or his attorney filed a motion to withdraw, which leads to speculation that he's now going to try and go pro se again in this Erica case, which is probably right because he wants to abuse her. And his Erica case was supposed to be done before the shooting case, but his attorneys asked for continuance. They got it. Then they were able to plea out the shooting case. So now that's gone, and now they moved to withdraw out of Erica's case. So I think that they probably knew what he was going to do and wanted to resolve as many things as they could, and now they are withdrawing out of the case, and I think that's why that derailed. So the speculation he may go for round 2 of Circus Town is potentially correct and go pro se.
That's going to be awesome again.
I guess the guy's exhausting to watch. He really is. I know it's great entertainment and it gets the views, but I'm just sitting here wondering who's going to draw the short straw for judges.
Yeah.
Well, it depends. He's in front of a female judge now, but it's all for calendar after today and goes to a male judge, and people think he behaves differently in front of a male judge. But, I don't know if the trial is going to get continued and then it could go to another judge or whatever. But right now, the theory will be tested of how he behaves in front of a male judge.
But as someone who has practiced maritime law for like a bee's dick away from 30 years.
Bee's dick. Term of the day.
People like, what do they mean when they say maritime law applies? I don't know. If anybody knows, please tell me.
My body is
please tell me how
international
maritime law applies to all of this.
Well, there are a lot of lawyers. There are a lot of
Gold fringe flag, baby. Gold fringe flag.
Exactly. Every one of us learned in law school that if there's fringe on the flag, there's no subject matter jurisdiction, and no one.
If it's gold fringe flag, that means it's a military court, which means it's naval, which means maritime law, which means something.
Oh, it's like so much deeper. It's like you because you have to go through the gate. That's the bar. I don't concede to be parting of the bar, so I won't go through the gate at the beginning of the court and be like, oh.
Shows up in the courtroom and starts arguing maritime law.
No, the problem was like, I mean, Andrea Burkhart would be like, what does this mean? I'm like, I don't know. It means nothing, Andrea. It means literally nothing. I don't know.
Of course you would say that.
Exactly. No,
It's a good question.
I always said that from the Darrell Brooks thing is he is clearly not a real sit guy. He's like, there's somebody trolling him in jail. Well, now prison, going, dude.
Jailhouse lawyer for sure.
Just argue this. They'll buy it. You're good to go. Just argue this. It'll be awesome. And then he goes and they just light him up. There's someone that's trolling him in prison.
He's a sovereign idiot.
Yeah. Somebody just asked Juicy. Any update on him?
Juicy Smollett.
It's on appeal to the state Supreme Court, I believe. Yeah, the Court of Appeals found that there was not double jeopardy issues, and he's appealing to the state Supreme Court, was the last I heard on it.
Ugh.
Now, a question for all of you. Do you think he actually will serve time? I had a feeling that we got the weekend in a couple days, and that was it. Just the fact he got locked up at all, everybody should be happy. But
wait, who? Darrell Brooks?
Juicy.
Oh,
Juicy
yeah.
Smollett.
He should serve years, but he won't. Juicy Smollett. He's not going anywhere.
All right. What other case is out there that? Oh, that's right. We'll start this off. We've got Joe here. I'm sure everything will go really calm. What about this new possible indictment from yet another possible indictment coming down from the grand jury for a former president? Who wants to jump in? Joe.
Guilty.
It's a lot more shaky than the indictment in Florida with the confidential records case, at least on the public stuff that I've seen. So I try to assess them each individually. That he did obstruction with respect to an official proceeding, I don't really see it. If there's some witness tampering allegation that's specific, maybe. Fraud against the United States, I don't really see that. There's no pecuniary interest that would lead to a fraud. That he deprived people of civil rights under 241, don't really see that. So the charges that have been sort of publicly alleged with respect to January 6th, the legal theories that seem available seem questionable at best.
He can't go to
There's a
trial.
big question about double jeopardy and whether or not the third impeachment exoneration precludes prosecution under double jeopardy principles.
Not a chance. Not even a little bit, no.
Was that even really an impeachment? I mean, there are all sorts of different legal issues with whether or not that was just like some sort of. It wasn't presided over by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, which is, and it was held after he left office. These are two considerable issues with whether that actually classifies as.
Well, I agree with you. However,
impeachment.
That would also delay anything, and we also need to not fool ourselves and think that there's actually some legal analysis here, because this is an extrajudicial deep state takeover of the country. It is a weaponization of the Department of Justice and the law.
Those are separate concerns. With all possible respect, Steve, whether or not that's true,
do we know what
is
charges
only a separate part.
Coming though, Kurt? Do we know what charges?
Well, no, that's what I've been saying has been publicly talked about. Like, because there's been news reports that have said, "Here's what's coming down the pipe." So I'm not just making this up off the top of my head, right? Because I covered it recently. They've been talking about 241. They've been talking about obstruction of official proceeding. They've been talking about fraud against the United States. They've been talking about witness tampering. I'm like, yeah, these are the things that are sort of in the pike, and then I try to give some analysis on top of it.
Well, I mean, how's that even
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know the answer to that question.
But Kurt, I mean, on top of that, we've had the statement that, I mean, to paraphrase the IRS, the ATF, etc. They are the checks and balances of the government.
Yeah, I saw that. That was really brilliant moment right there. Yeah, they themselves are the check and balances against what? Against apparently the people of the United States. They're the check and balance against the people of the United States. Which
what was that?
I hate to point out the obvious, but the people in their collective sovereign will are sovereign. There is no check against the sovereign. They cannot be wrong. So to have a check against the people makes no sense from first principles.
I'll tell you right now, though. I mean, one thing I think we can agree on is he cannot possibly win any trial in Washington D.C. He needs to. He cannot go to trial.
He'll be guilty.
So I'm saying they could charge him with arson for burning down the White House, and he would be convicted. He would be convicted in D.C. So, because he's the level of vitriol. DC is like literally 95% Democrat. And this has been a major problem that he faced really since his administration began, that he was never able to find people who he didn't do a great job in picking people. But I was on this Twitter space yesterday with Sebastian Gorka, who pointed out there, he's like, we had 4,000 jobs to fill, and we couldn't find anyone who worked in Washington who was willing to, interested and willing and remotely competent to get these jobs done, so we ended up having to turn to the GOP and ask them for suggestions, because no one wanted to come here.
Who wants to? If I'm living in sunny Florida and this beautiful, looking out my door, why would I want to go to DC? I mean, here's the thing. Like I tell you, I would highly recommend y'all read John Davidson's article from the 19th of July called "Biden's DOJ Will Trigger a Major Crisis If Trump is Indicted for January 6th." And it says, here's the subtitle: "The weaponization of federal law enforcement, if it continues, is going to delegitimize the 2024 election before a single ballot is cast." The DOJ, the agency that is supposed to uphold the law, by indicting Trump, will in fact destroy the rule of law in this country. And this article lays it out very concisely. It is this crusade that they have to take over and to weaponize the DOJ is so poisonous to our republic that I am very concerned that this guy, Jack Smith, do they really want to imprison Donald Trump, the leading Republican candidate? They're going to throw him in a jail cell for years. They're trying to start a civil war.
No, this is a test case, Steve, and regardless of the legal analysis of whether or not Trump is actually guilty of any of these charges, the fact that he's being charged with any crime is the fundamental problem. And you know what? We had the test case here in Michigan when our former governor Snyder was charged criminally involving the water issue in Flint. Now, that was a test case for this. Can we charge our political rivals criminally and get away with it? Now, eventually those charges were dismissed, but that was a test case.
Remember the Alaska senator that was basically deplatformed because he was charged but then exonerated, but yet he lost his election. What about the January 6 people that are imprisoned? What about the electors that are being targeted in Michigan? They are criminalizing political opposition to the deep state.
All right. I don't think all those are necessarily on the same footing. And I think we need to separate these things.
It's the middle guy and it's the top guy.
No.
It's everybody who opposes the deep state is being targeted.
I do not agree. I think that a lot of the people that you mentioned, including the electors in Michigan, including a lot of people involved in January 6th, clearly broke the law. They engaged in obvious illegal behavior.
You think the electors in Michigan broke the law?
Yes.
Well, Kurt,
now,
is
we
there
talk
a
about
deep
that case?
state? Well, no, let's just start with the fact: is there a deep state, Kurt, or is it just a fantasy?
Well, yeah, there is a deep state because there is the non-elected groups that perpetuate past administrations. There is the bureaucracy, right? The top level officials get replaced, but the bureaucracy doesn't care because the bureaucracy manages to just ignore the top level officials. So yes, there is a deep state. That's very true.
Is Epps a Fed or not?
Oh, I don't know about that. I think that first of all, he definitely didn't kill himself. Second of all, there's a decent chance he's still alive. And third of all, that he was definitely a asset of some agency somewhere.
Epps, not Ray Epps, not Epstein.
Yeah, not
okay.
Epstein,
I'm sorry.
Ray Epstein. Yeah,
okay,
Ray
sorry.
Epstein,
I thought we moved on to other topics.
Sorry. No, he's staying here. He's staying here on January 6th.
Hey guys, I gotta jump. I got a meeting coming up. I'll see you guys later.
I knew this would chase you up, brother.
I thought Epstein had a nickname now. I thought we were calling him Epps. I was confused. Okay, sorry. Yeah, no, I think there's a decent chance that Epps is an asset of some agency. Yes.
We're 5 minutes into a January 6th chat. I was like, Rob's still here. What's going on?
Yeah, he has a meeting now. He's got to go.
Where does Rob live again?
he lives too close. He lives too close to actually
Argentina.
It's great seeing him. So but I mean, you think there is a deep state? You just don't. You don't really think that.
I think that whether there's a deep state is separate and apart from the legal issues that face these people individually. I want to separate the difference. I think that some of these people clearly broke the law. They're clearly guilty and they should be punished. That is not to say that other people shouldn't be punished. If we're going to talk, for example, about issues about double standards, we can talk about Biden and the laptop and the issues of DOJ suppressing all that and also suppressing knowledge of it with respect to interference with the election and all the rest of it. So we can talk about double standards and everything. I just want to separate the issues.
Okay,
into,
you
into
mentioned
parts.
you mentioned you thought that the electors in Michigan broke the law. Can you clarify? Can you clarify what law you think they broke and how they broke it?
Yeah, so I think the electors broke the law by basically taking their cosplay Karening that they want to speak to the manager because they're upset with how the election turned out to illegal levels by doing such things as forging paperwork, forging certificates, pretending to fill out official documents that aren't really official documents, trying to submit official documents, trying to force their way into hearings, and so forth and so on.
Time out for a second. Let's you said you want to approach it from a legal perspective. I think that's good.
Yeah.
We have a couple of lawyers here, so let's break that down.
Right.
Do you think that there was, when you're saying there's forgery here, okay? Did you think they forged their own signatures? Or
No,
you don't think that, right? But so what was the forgery?
They forged their own signature.
And who is the fraud perpetuated upon that they were trying to trick? Do you think they were trying to actually trick Mike Pence into thinking that they had the sanctioning from the Secretary of State for Michigan or Governor Whitmer, that they had the authority, that they had their blessing and sanctioning? Do you think that was part of their minds, their mens rea, that they thought that we're going to successfully dupe Mike Pence into counting this, and he's going to think that Whitmer and the Secretary of State signed off on this? Do you think that was part of their mens rea?
I think that some of those people are that delusional, probably, yes. And I think that whether or not anyone would be fooled is separate and apart from the attempt to commit the fraud. Just because the person won't be fooled by the fraud doesn't mean that you're not attempting to commit the fraud.
No. I'm asking you whether a reasonable person would ever believe that the fact that they submitted this without the sanctioning from the powers that be from the states, that any reasonable person would think that Mike Pence, when he gets this, is going to be confused as to whether or not this was something that came with the blessing from the state.
That's legally irrelevant, right? Just because I forged something poorly and try to submit it to the bank, and you'd be like, "Well, no one would believe this." That doesn't mean that the crime occurs. So it doesn't matter if they would convince Mike Pence. If they did the fraud, then that's it.
But as we know, MLS law from Michigan Law School, we know that he's a huge Mike Pence supporter. So I'd like to hear his views.
Just because they
Pence
were
20, give us the Pence 2024 slogan that we
the Pence 2024 slogan. No, I looking at the complaint initially, I'm going to do a stream on it later and go more in depth, but at least my cursory look on it, I think it's definitely a political thing. I don't think they have the legal backing. But Kurt, I'm assuming you've looked at it a little bit more in depth than I have, and maybe there's something there. I just honestly haven't looked at it yet in depth. I'm going to be doing a stream this weekend though on it.
What I'm saying to you is, if I submitted some sort of documentation to you fine panel here saying that I am the Secretary of State for the United States, right? I mean, do I think that you would like that? Would any reasonable person think that that's something that you're going to take as far as that you're going to?
I might believe Secretary of Treasury, but
yeah. But it goes to your subjective intent, though. What is the purpose for which you are doing this?
The purpose for which you're doing it. I'll tell you why.
If we're looking for the guilty mind, we're looking to your subjective impression. So if you believe it, then you believe that you're doing this for the purpose of trying to trick it. Whether or not any reasonable person would necessarily be tricked, I'm not sure is necessarily.
I don't know.
What about mistaken fact, right? Mistaken law is not a defense, but mistaken fact is. If they truly believe that they are the electoral representatives and they believe that they're acting under the color of law in that capacity, and it's true that they're not, it's a mistaken fact, which is a defense.
Yes, but the mistaken fact does have to be reasonable.
Well, yeah.
And mitigating against the claim of mistaken fact is that in order to get the authority to do it, they do have to get an official the recognition from the Secretary of State and Whitmer before they're able to proceed. So as far as mistake of fact, the mistake of fact that you would be alleging here, because I'm not looking to look at this, I'm trying to remove as much rose coloring from my glasses as possible. So that's why I want to try and say, okay, if you're the state, they're going to be like, how can you make a mistake of fact when the process did not reach a point where you had that authority? You should be aware of what the process is. And since that process had not reached that status where you had the authority to submit that, you thereby were trying, you can't say I was mistaken. I thought I can do it. That's like me saying I thought I could do it. What led you to believe that you could sign that slate, Joe? It's ridiculous because there is a process. However, if you're asking yourself why they did this, we all know why they did this, and nothing to do with tricking anyone.
There are a bunch of Karens who want to talk to the manager. There are a bunch of Karens who want to maximum Karen this.
With all due respect, that's not a reasonable
interpretation, Kurt. That's an unreasonable interpretation, Kurt. That's not that. Put yourself back in December 2020, and you'll remember that there was all this talk about deadlines and when slates have to be submitted by in order for them to be considered timely and proper. So, from their perspective, if I'm their counsel, I'd say to myself, from their perspective, there's all this mess and shenanigans as far as figuring out what the heck happened in our state. There's a procedural duty that our votes will now not be counted unless we submit them by a date certain. So we need to meet that date certain in case later on it comes out that we had to submit it. Otherwise, when Michigan ultimately falls for Trump, which they anticipate is going to happen, that when Michigan is ultimately determined in his favor, our votes won't count anymore because we won't meet the procedural deadline of this date. So we need to sign off on this now, not because we're trying to trick Pence. Everyone, every newspaper in the country is covering this.
Deep breaths.
Joe's I'm not even agitated. I'm not even agitated. I'm simply saying that every newspaper in the country is covering the fact that these different slates of electors are coming forward. I don't think it was just Michigan. I think it was a couple of states. And the reason they're doing it is to meet the procedural issues, not to try and trick Mike Pence. And I think it's a ridiculous interpretation to say that there was a mens rea here, that they wanted to deceive the vice president with that he's going to think that this was a sanctioned slate of electors if in fact they never end up obtaining that sanctioning. So that's why I think that this is certainly political, and it's political because if they wanted to charge us, and
I'm not disputing that it's political,
right? And it's so political that they waited 2 years to bring this. They could have brought this back in January 2021. But they didn't.
Yeah, fair enough.
They waited until now so that this case will linger all the way into the next election, and it's going to be,
I'll agree with that.
So what I'm saying is, if you're looking at their mens rea, I don't see how anyone could reasonably believe that they had a mens rea of trying to commit a fraud upon the Senate and try and obstruct that proceeding or whatever. When they had they knew that and everyone knew that they had this deadline, that procedurally they had to submit that by date X, and that's why they submitted it when they did.
Well, you know what? I'll respond like this. There's a deadline here in Texas where I have to submit my car paperwork, or I wouldn't be able to have my car registered here. But the deadline was coming up. So you know what I did? I fraudulently submitted some paperwork, but no reasonable person in Texas would believe that So Joe, I think, unfortunately, I think you're politically.
Kurt
I think Joe is politically compromised in this because the issue here isn't would Pence have believed this thing. It is what did you do to try to convince those people? So you have true electors under the procedures, and then you have fake electors under the procedures. Now you may be right? They may not get convicted, but as a prima facie case, did they submit paperwork that was legally insufficient? Did they know that they weren't the true electors that were from the state? Those are
they fake?
They never had the opportunity to submit the paperwork.
But again, all those things, I do show a clear understanding that yes, a case can be brought that these fake electors were not the proper electors, and regardless of what Mike Pence, or could they have committed the crime all the way through or actuated the crime. That's one thing.
They're actually
Did they do
alternate
everything?
electors.
But did they do
Now,
everything?
hold on.
that
You're saying fake, Nate. Is it fake or alternate? Because that's two completely different things.
Okay,
Yeah, right.
Alternate. You're right. Alternate, but I would say they're fake electors, but alternate electors.
Well, no. If
that's
an
exactly what the
elector
AG
drops
would say.
dead, then you have an alternate step in. So they're not fake. They're just not.
Well, the electors
status.
from Michigan were Democrats. These were Republican, right? So
well, to be fair, they're unsanctioned electors. They're unsanctioned by the state.
Yeah, because
So-
the way the electors are
Right.
the way the electors
Because
are
alternate
picked,
implies that if the other guys
there
can't
want
do
to
it,
be
it's their job to
electors.
do it.
They would
which is not true.
they would be electors. They would be electors in some alternate universe. Where
yeah.
Donald
So
Trump
so
had
so
won.
just to be clear, what we're talking about when we talk about electors, we're talking about electors are chosen, right? The people who won the popular vote in Michigan. The Democratic Party gets to choose the electors. They chose a set of electors, and those are electors that vote. These are Republican electors, so they have no legal authority. The Democrats have chosen their electors and the alternates for those electors. So I don't think it's proper to call these alternate electors because they're not. These are essentially fake electors, but since we don't want to use that term, we can call them whatever else. But these were not the electors chosen by the Democrats who won the state. These were frauds.
What did they do to say, hey, I'm the elector or I'm the alternate elector? You guys are saying fraudulent
I think
documents.
they literally just said that.
Well, they were selected as if Trump had won in Michigan, they would have been the electors sent to D.C. to cast their ballot. And there were another set of electors that if Trump had lost, Biden won, then there were Democratic electors that were going to be sent to D.C. to cast their ballot. And so because the question of who actually won in Michigan was up in the air, both parties were saying, you're going, essentially. And they both showed up. And then Pence ended up taking the Democratic electors and not the others. And I know Kurt's shaking his head because there are some documents involved and stuff. But broad strokes, that's what happened.
Have any of you seen what they signed? Because I think a relevant question here is if they signed, if there's in there some sort of oath that they have been sanctioned by the states. In that case, I think that potentially they could have a far more serious problem because now you're signing affidavits and potentially committing some level of perjury where you're basically saying that Whitmer or the proper authority signed off on us. And I think it's very possible, if not likely, that sort of language is incorporated in the, as a cover to their vote or something like that to basically give that validation, because you would think that would be a normal thing that they would. If I'm trying to I've never seen one of these documents before, and I don't know if any of you
I can't
have.
remember if they're out there. I did a stream on this about 18 months ago. This is not a new issue; just the charges are new. But they've been addressing these Michigan electors for quite some time, and that's why I came with the mistaken fact thing is because I believe it was based on the documents. And it's been so long since I looked at them. Because if I'm a elector, if I get called and said, hey, we're going to send you to DC, and they give me some paperwork and I say, okay, and I go, it's mistaken fact, I think is a valid defense here.
Yeah.
For those
I agree
particular
with that.
individuals.
And by the way, how about this Chalix super chat that came in earlier? What if they had legal advice to do that? What would be the
That doesn't save you.
Get a second opinion.
Yeah, that doesn't save you.
Yeah.
But just so we all in the clear on the facts here, the Democratic electeds that were sent to Washington from Michigan were the electors. Everything was good with those electors. They were the electors. There was also a second set of electors that were sent that were not good, that were fraud, that were not the electors. So that's the issue here. You had one set of electors that were state certified everything, and you had another set of electors that were not. Obviously, were not.
Yeah,
Right.
but
They're not electors because they didn't receive a commission from the governor. That's why they're not electors. Yeah, the Republicans have a slate of potential electors. The Democrats have a slate of potential electors. To actually become electors, you actually have to receive a commission from the governor. They didn't receive a commission. They're not, in fact, electors. The actual electors showed up to cast their ballots. These guys are cosplaying wannabes and upset and want to burn everything down. So yeah,
No, I don't think it's burning everything down. I mean, there's actually a really good article that I just stumbled upon in Reason.com, which is breaking down the logic of the defendants, which basically is saying that they were looking to preserve their objections to a contested election, and that's grounded in historical precedent. So and that they're not. It's not really the language they use is that there'd be contingent electors, that's their way of preserving their right to objection, which I think that's probably the best
Maybe there's
adjective
maybe
that I heard,
maybe that's fair. Maybe there is some case law out there that provides a defense that I'm not aware of, and I'm certainly open to that possibility. I just like on first blush, it looks possible. If there's specific case law out there that says no, then fine. If they have defenses that I haven't considered, then fine. I'm just like, yeah, there seems like there's something here.
What about all these references to 1960? About Hawaii sending 2 sets of electors. They're coming in on super chats, and I genuinely don't know
Anytime
that.
you have to ask about the exception, that proves the rule.
Yeah.
Anytime you're like, well, but what about this? But what about that? But what about that?
Well,
What
isn't
about
that
what
precedent
happened
is?
in 1960?
Isn't that what precedent is? Is whataboutism? I mean, come on.
That's
No,
actually
no.
the 1960 Hawaii case is actually in this, and it says the 1960 Hawaii case refers to a dispute over whether Nixon or Kennedy won the state in that year's presidential election. Nixon initially was declared the winner by a razor-thin margin of 140 votes. Democrats challenged that outcome in court, and a recount ultimately awarded Hawaii's 3 electoral votes to Kennedy. In the meantime, however, electoral college nominees from both parties convened on December 19, 1960, the deadline that year. Both groups signed certificates identifying themselves as duly and legally appointed and qualified members of Electoral College, and both sets of certificates were sent to Washington, D.C.
That sounds similar.
It sounds exactly.
That sounds exact. Well, no, it's a lot different because there was at no point in time was Trump declared the winner of Michigan. And in this case,
But if he had
me
been and did not have a set of electors, then he would have waived his ability to grab the state.
Well,
so
yeah,
in order to grab the state, he
Preserve
had to have pre-set electors sent up so that if the outcome of the election did change, he would have electors ready to go and vote for him.
But again, in that case, Nixon had won, recount, then Nixon had lost 2 electors. Okay, now you have a lot more context in this one. In this one, Trump never won, and Trump was always behind the mission.
But if he had,
But here's the thing, Nate.
But that's the
in that
key.
1960
Yeah,
Hawaii
that's
case.
that
In the
if-
1960 Hawaii case, I think you're mistaken about the fact here, Nate. Because in the 1960 Hawaii case, the Democrats did not know that they had won. It was only on January 4th, which was 2 weeks later, that a state judge, Ronald Jameson, retroactively validated the Democrats' seemingly premature certificates. So
yeah, agreed.
Well, there you go. It's the same thing.
So
exactly the
Maybe
same
it
thing.
is.
This
Maybe it is
very
the same thing.
complex.
Fair enough.
Let me give a shot at trying. It's sort of like this. Okay, so I'm a defense attorney. I put my client up on the stand to defend himself against a charge. He says, I didn't do it, blah, 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 blah. The jury comes back guilty, right? Then the state turns around and says, well, we're going to charge you with perjury because you defended yourself in court. And so now you got a perjury charge because you got up there and the jury said that you lied because they found you guilty. So when you said you didn't do it, you lied. So now I'm going to charge you with perjury. That's what they're doing here.
Seriously?
Yeah, I don't get that. I'm from what you guys have been saying. And again, maybe I'm not understanding the facts. Nixon was thought to have won the state. Then they found recount. Nixon didn't lose. They had 2 electors because obviously the recount and stuff. Then it was Nixon actually lost, and you had now these 2 sets of electors. And there's been 2 sets of electors many times also in the past during the Civil War and all that stuff. So this is actually not a new thing. But in this particular case, Trump lost the state. There was a recount. He lost again. Recount lost again. And so at no point was Trump ever the person that you can say had won that state. So I think that's I assume
that's exactly what happened in Hawaii.
History. Nate, that's some bullshit because if both elector sets went up in Hawaii, okay, they're saying Nixon won. They sent up 2 sets of electors because the Democrats are saying, hell no, he didn't win. They sent them both up. Then on a recount, he happened to prevail. The electors switched. You're saying, oh, well, because it recounted multiple times. Well, then they became a lie. So what you're saying, Nate, is that if Nixon had won the recount, then we would be prosecuting the second set of electors that the Democrats set up, using your logic.
All right. What I'm saying is that when Nixon's electors were 100% legitimate initially after the first count, because he won, right? They thought he won by 140 votes. So his electors were 100% legitimate. The Democrats didn't have legitimate electors at that time.
But they still set them.
So, well, hold on. It was January 6th. We're talking about January 4th, right? Because you guys said by January 4th. So they sent them, January 6th is when they count the votes. So you're talking about so it had to be January. So again, we're talking about January 6th is when they have the vote. So anyway, so they have now the Republican electors. Then you had this whole thing with the recount, and January 4th, somebody said January 4th, then the judge certifies these are the Democrats have won. So now you have the Democrats electors who are now the legitimate electors. So in that case, you've had two sets of electors, which I think is very, very possible, where you have one set of electors who thought they were legitimate, who were legitimate for a particular point in time, and then you have a second set of electors who now are legitimate electors. I think that's totally different than in this case in Michigan. Hold on, let me finish. In this case in Michigan, where you've had only one set of legitimate electors the whole time.
But you're
the Republican electors. Hold on. The Republican electors were never legitimate in Michigan. They were. That's a difference in
at the
why.
time. At the time of action by the Michigan electors, and at the time of action by the Hawaiian electors, both of them had no reason to think that they had valid justification for submitting that slate. What comes later with that in Hawaii it happened to flip and in Michigan it didn't cannot change their mens rea at the time that they acted weeks earlier. That doesn't make any sense. Just because the facts played out in their favor.
Joe, were those people under criminal indictment though for doing this? That wasn't even what the case was, right? They weren't charged with this, because what I'm thinking the major way to distinguish these cases is back in 1960, they were not trying to put their criminal adversaries in jail. So it could even have been under what Kurt's saying. It's quite possible. I don't know the facts, that maybe they did do something technically illegal back in the Hawaii case and it didn't get prosecuted because that wasn't the sentiment of people back then. But now they want to put people they disagree with in jail. And you have to look at the facts and say, can the law support them on that if you want to know whether you're really in jeopardy or not? And maybe it can and maybe it can't. I don't know the facts on it. But it seems to me in a variety of circumstances, the idea is let's put people we disagree with in jail. Let's stop people from saying things we disagree with. That is the problem I have with the government right now.
The political aspects of this and being politically dangerous is obvious, right? I mean, the way that we're prosecuting people that we don't like, the going after Trump, and it's sort of its political repercussions, going after these electors and its political repercussions, the unequal treatment from the Department of Justice and how they've pursued or lack thereof Hunter Biden and other people, and the unequal treatment of everything is very, very politically dangerous. And so people's response to this and sort of the political aspects of it, that this is some BS political, like I totally get that. That makes total logical sense. Even in January 6th, I think to some degree you can make that case, although I think it's a little bit less persuasive. But to say that significant people are being swapped in and Epps is not being swapped in for potentially political reasons is at least partially valid. So that we're heading into a dangerous place in our country where we're heading into third world, Banana Republic territory where we're prosecuting our political rivals.
See Brazil
is very, very dangerous. In the direction we're heading, I agree with that for sure.
Yeah. Well, on that note, to wrap everything up.
Okay, I mean that was a good argument, but okay.
It is a mess, and I definitely hope we revisit this. So, Steve, the talkative one, Southern Law, where can people find you?
Southern Law, that's the name of the channel. And lots of updates on some of the cases we talked about earlier. If you want to know the technical stuff and documents and details behind it, you can check out streams I did before this one.
Nate left.
I have to unmute. Well, listen, I'll say this. Whenever you come to my channel, and I'm going to say things you are 100% going to disagree with. I'm going to say things pro-Trump. I'm going to say things anti-Trump. Why? Because I don't care about the politics. And I'll challenge anyone here that I've had the best record in calling all these trials and all these cases than any lawyer on YouTube. And you can just go with it. And the reason why is because I don't really care about the politics. I only care about the facts of the law. So listen, so if you want to hear the truth, and you want somebody who's going to tell you this guy's going to get convicted, like I feel so proud because I'm the only person that said Rittenhouse is obviously innocent. And I'm the only person else that said it's obvious Chauvin's going to get convicted. Every time I'm Arbery, you name it, I've always been right, and that's because I am not politically compromised. I will tell you what you don't want to hear, but one thing you'll know, it's coming from a place of the facts and the law, and that's what Nate the Lawyer is all about.
Ooh, look at that. Good ad copy. MLS, Dave.
Yeah, check it out on MLS Law Show. I've been streaming trials and doing some other things, some collaborations. And Chandler and I were supposed to be covering Boone starting on Monday, but unfortunately that's been moved. Yeah, so we're gonna find something else to do. But we got Show Business, and that'll be fun to watch along with some others here. Jeff in particular.
Don't even try it, man. Don't even compete with me because I got your number, brother.
There's no way I'm going to try to compete with Jeff on Show Business.
It's not.
But yeah, so I have so that's what I had coming up, and I don't know what I'm going to do now. But we're going to talk about the Michigan elector case probably this weekend and do some things like that. But we have a good time on the stream, so check it out right there. MLS.
Steve.
Yes. Well, I do not make predictions involving law, so I'm never wrong because I don't make such predictions, or I try very hard not to. But I will predict that Chandler Remington will be on my channel at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tonight.
Nice.
And I can guarantee it. And we will have a Moscow Mule, and it's going to be my opportunity to really understand the enigma that is Chandler Remington, because she is quite an enigma. We see her, she's always on these streams, but do we really know who the real Chandler is? We're going to find out tonight, 8 p.m. tonight on my Rumble and YouTube channel and Twitter, and we will talk and have a nice discussion and have a couple Moscow Mules and get to the bottom of things. It's going to be called Tweets, Ticks, and the Law.
All right.
Yes, because Steve is obsessed with my lip tick, like when I purse my lips when I'm thinking. He talks about you wanted to make that a law card, so I guess I'm excited.
I tried to, but Jeff all keeps deleting my streams. It'll come, maybe series 2.
Maybe.
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to that.
So Chandler, while you're here, what do you have coming up?
So I'm Chandler Remington. I'm a paralegal from Los Angeles, California, and tonight I'm going to be on Steve Gosney's channel, as you all just heard. I'm really excited for that. I'm going to be a guest on Honey Badger Radio on Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and that'll be fantastic. I am going to be doing some of my own streams and my own videos coming up. I've been really busy lately just with work and trying to save for Matsuri, which I'm excited for. But now I finally have time to do some videos. I have a little time off. So I want to do a couple of videos that I'm looking forward to putting out soon. One on this whole situation, talking about therapy. I have some more comments on that, and I'd love to get into it on my own channel. I'm also going to be reviewing the Barbie movie because people have asked me to. They're interested in a woman's perspective, but from the perspective of a woman who isn't a feminist. So I'm not looking forward to watching it, but I am looking forward to critiquing it. It should be interesting. And
10 times they use the word patriarchy.
Oh, God.
With that, unironically. 10 times.
I've heard a lot of things. I want to see it for myself and judge. I don't know how I'm going to feel about it, but the trailer was very cringy, so we'll see.
It's juge, not judge.
And then ultimately, I'm also going to be doing some videos about the Zachariah Anderson case, so stay tuned. You can find me at Remy_legal.
Jeff.
Hey, hi everybody. What I've got coming up on the horizon is the Taylor Show Business trial. As we just talked about, she's been found competent to stand trial. Jury selection is going to start about 10 minutes from now. Opening statements are ready to go on Monday morning. It's a 5-day trial. Everything's going to be awesome from that. That's what I'm going to be doing for the next week at least. And then 10 days of normal legal vices stuff, maritime cases, current events, pop culture, whatever. And then I'm out on vacation for 2 weeks from the 9th to 22nd, where we're going to be hitting up Anime Matsuri for 3 days in Kurt and Nate's little neck of the woods. We're looking forward to that. It'll be fun. It'll be awesome, and I can't.
Yeah, baby.
All right, Kurt.
Yeah, so hi, I'm on Civil Law every weekday morning at 9:15 Central, 10:15 Eastern. I do a daily news show where I try to wrap up news and news events and talk about a lot of the stuff that's happening in the news and inform me about stuff that's maybe less in the news, and try to provide some good quality education, a little bit of pop culture, a little bit of in-depth legal analysis. We had a really good one today on an in-depth case dealing with who owns a painting that was seized by the Germans during World War II. So we had a really interesting in-depth analysis on that one today. And we do some other stuff. We do a lot of Supreme Court review, Court of Appeal review, try to provide good quality legal education, and also try to make sure that we're, answering the precise question that we're looking at any moment, as I was attempting to do during the stream, so we can separate legal from political and, one aspect of a question from other aspects of a question to answer them in their component parts. So if you want to try to do some nuanced discussion of cases that are happening, tune in to Uncivil Law. We have some good stuff happening over there.
All right. And as always on the show, we like to close out with Joe, because Joe always wants to share his wisdom after he shares his channel.
Yeah. So I'm Joe Neerman. My channel's Good Lawgic on Rumble, YouTube. I actually do locals. I try to live stream onto locals. During the summer, I've been live streaming while driving up to the mountains, and I plan on furthering our discussion today. And I'm going to share with you the worst thing I've seen on Netflix, which ties into what Chandler was talking about in the CRT conversation we're having. The worst thing I've seen in Netflix in years. This thing is just a terrible statement about our culture. So I plan on discussing what I was watching and why it was so completely not just stupid, but actually evil. I don't know what a Moscow Mule is. I'm not really a Lawrical, although I did predict 10 million for Johnny Depp. That's
vodka,
my
lime, ginger beer, the end.
Oh, thank you. And I'm also stupid enough to be competing with Jeff in streaming the Taylor Business trial. You should not watch me. You should watch him. He's smarter, he's better looking, and he's funnier, and he's a far more competent attorney than I can ever aspire to be.
No, but Joe is Joe, so go to Joe.
Literally, the only reason to watch me is because Joe is Joe. That's my whole pitch. Joe is Joe. But I will be doing.
I don't have anything better than that. That's like all I got.
No. We're both speaking truth here. We're both speaking truth. No, it's not really. I think there's gonna be a couple of channels which are gonna be covering it, but I cannot. If you're not watching with me, I strongly recommend that you watch with Jeff, because oh my god, dude is awesome.
And if you're not watching with me, I strongly suggest you watch with me.
There you go. I told you he's funnier. I told you. I knew it. Anyway, so that's all I got for you on that. The one thing that I wanted to share, this is really important. The Michigan defense, the best defense that the Michigan case that we haven't even talked about here.